I'm going to start off this evening. I'm sort of just an introducer, though I will read one of my dear friend Lucia's poems. But we're here as for the literary community. Many of you will have been at the beautiful memorial organized a couple of months ago for Lucia by the family. This one is specifically to celebrate him as an author, but also as an animator of literary society and a educator, an encourager, I would say, a sort of spirit of poetry that continues to live on. I suppose it's inevitable that once the person is gone, it lives on in each of us who knew him, and therefore somewhat gets diluted amongst other people who also live on in us. But myself, I'm convinced that Luch is alive, that I'll meet him again, and that his influence remains profound and pure. I would say that he's a great combiner of his own community, the Italian-Canadian community of Toronto, specifically, that very specific community, and the international community of letters. And as such, he's a real innovator in Canadian culture, a real bringer together of the local and the universal without traducing either one, without fleeing from your own home to a supposedly more sophisticated cosmopolitan ambience and idiom, and without, on the other hand, limiting your own local and rooted reality to local color or something that is limited. He was somebody who was very able to find the universal in the local. But the main thing about him is he was just a great friend and a great poet. Truly a great poet, and not recognized very widely as such, and perhaps the way literary life and attention goes, maybe never to be recognized except by those of us who know the truth of it. So I'm going to read one poem by him and then introduce Allan Briesmaster, one of the four of us who have tried to organize this and who's going to direct the first part up until the intermission, okay? Luch says, I miss other people's voices, tired of my own monologue in this recovery room without sound. Every word slavery. I am a professional teacher, do nothing but talk in the city where I was born. I've talked the bricks, the verandas, the side streets, the acquaintances everywhere. I want my city back. Without words and full of snow in the winter, humid in the summer in the market where the smells of fruit and fish fight in the street, the apartments where fucking happens, schoolyards, alley, parks. I was young, but I want to dream again, the start, move again, my limbs, back into participation, joy and tragedy. She was both. Sweaty bed sheets. We were in a French hotel. Cockroaches on the walls and ceilings. There is a mosque and a saint living atop a Greek column. I have an appointment to meet a woman who will sell me dates. But she won't show me her face, only her bare legs and a tuft of the reddest pubic hair. Her stitched up genitalia holding back the secret that she's selling me the same dates my father ate during the war when he hid in the caves. Allan Briesmaster.
Thank you, Al, for your reflections on our friend. And thank all of you. I thank all of you for coming out on this cold night and bringing your warmth into this room. We're going to have in all around 20 readers, as Al mentioned, in two parts. And each reader will be just reading a short piece with a few remarks, which would be welcome, on what your connection is to our friend. And just to put the first half readers at ease, so they're oriented to when they're going to come up. This is the order of the readers in the first half. It's going by alphabetically by first name, with just one exception. Antonio Delfonso, Barbara Landry, Brenda Clews, Caroline Di Giovanni, Steve Venright, Clara Blackwood, Corrado Paina, Damiano Pietropaolo, Domenico Capilongo, Elena Wolf, and Ewan White. I think everyone is here, except with maybe one exception. We'll see how it goes. But before I bring our first reader up, actually, he won't be the first. I will be. I want to read something by Luciano from the wonderful Noctograms. And my connection with Luch is that for years before and after the 11 years when I was a partner with him in Quattro Books, I had the extraordinary pleasure and distinction of being one of his friends. So this is on page 262 of Noctograms. The smell I gave to memory is lilac, a ladder of scent for climbing down to meet the dead. Perfume that comes from isolation, imagination curling into the nostrils. How people disappeared, how the air cloaked them and took them away just when I loved them most. I chew the bread and remember the kitchens where they sat. I descend to them as if I were a wine cellar. How I create with them, for them, but sometimes against them. And I think back to school days where I thought they were just outside the classroom door, taking sneak peeks at me through the door window. And I tried to catch them, laughing at me, laughing eyes that followed me everywhere. Love looking at me, at the real me, forever in the classroom, suffering and re-suffering, a million schoolboy crushes. Now, our next first reader, Antonio Delfonso. You can use the shorter one if you...
So I have the privilege of being one of Luciano's enemies. We were very close. He acted in my first feature in 2005, Bruco, as a publisher. And we were friends. I was supposed to publish him. We fell out. And I came back to him about 5-6 years ago, and I made a film on him. It's called Conversation with Luciano. It's on YouTube. So I'll leave. Thank you. So I'll read one of his. Whenever we pass the man who talks to himself at the corner of Markham and Bloor, I'm not allowed to stop to listen to him. I'm not allowed to stop to listen to him. I'm sucked in by the intonation, the quasi-Shakespearean magnitude of the fractured pronouncements, emphasis, compulsive repetitions, random stress of thoughts and phrases. I gather nothing, just fragments of a rage against the world, against self. Why am I so intent on hearing this man? Shouldn't I be afraid, thinks my son, who wants to keep moving on. He urges me to cross the road. He pulls me away from the soliloquy, concerned that language might transfix me. He is a child, and immobility frightens him. He sees how a human can become a barking dog, expelled from the house, restrained to the yard, leashed to a voice. Thank you.
Now, Barbara Landry, come up, and you will have noticed there's an option here for shorter people. And then for people like me, this is a little more adjustable than the other one. So take your pick according to your size.
Good evening, everyone. Really great to see you all here to honor our beloved Luciano and his poetry and his artwork. I didn't realize how prolific Luch was in his art. Before I read, I have a little anecdote. During the lockdowns, my husband and I would visit Luch in the park near his house. And I remember a really cold February day. We were all bundled up. We had our warm beverages, and Luch pulled out a flask of grappa and introduced us to Cafe Correcto. He explained that it was coffee that was corrected. My husband was drinking chai tea, so he called his a chai tea correcto. Luch laughed his head off. So those were our grappa in the park days. Lenten ash on world's forehead. The dark is a higher concern, offering entrance. There is much that passes through night, will bend you if you ask it. The ever start, ever hidden in a dusty sleeve. A learning style reunited. A leap into more leap. More air to know. More otherwise to inhale. Night confronts the broken bread and returns it corrected. And another topic that Luch and I love to talk about was classical music. And when I read Noctograms, there are so many musical references, and I told Luch how much I had loved that. Lapping at my feet, the dark water asks me, how can you trust the solid ground on which love expires? The ocean at night is a revelation that night too is an ocean. To be asleep in the recurring waves, a cradle of back, a cradle of forth, a cradle of whale, of shark and seaweed, of sleep, a hand with no ring on his fingers, no stars or moon, no peach, no plum. To drown at night is to pray between the whale and the wave, the shark and the seaweed. No sound in the central prayer rocking in the central silence. No eye, no mouth, no ear, no burden, no garden that withers, not even a window, not even a door or a compass. The waves and the seaweed, the shark and the whale, the central prayer in the central silence, the grace note itself is there is no note.
Thank you. Now we have Brenda Clews. And just a suggestion to the readers, you might like to mention the book that you're reading from, or if it's a unpublished work, where you can find it. And remember that books are for sale at the book table near the entrance.
Thank you, Allan. It's good to see so many people here. Wow. I'm going to read two poems from Book of Disorders, and one. Well, you'll know who it's for. The voice in me, the viscous black sap I talk around. In fact, there is no guest to accommodate. The hand goes in the sack, retrieving something that was audible once before I got distorted, before illness paved the basement floor with sick organs. He never talks, sits there near the furnace, listens, watches. Attentive, I become attentive too, of my own paternal drive, the way I watch my little boy, his little feet, I kissed them and watched them grow. His little words, I kissed them, and all his gestures. I kissed his head and watched it fill his eyes, joyful how love clarifies vision. Watched him grow into a child who disappeared, loving everything unselfconsciously. I miss the clarity that once loved as it was loved. Yes, I think that's for Julian. And I met Luch back in the 70s. I think maybe 77, 78. He was like absolutely gorgeous, drop dead gorgeous. And I'm just so glad I knew him back then, because I just have such vivid memories of him. And then we reconnected, I think, in 2012. So he was in my life, I guess, for 10 years. You know, we would meet, and like many people in the room, we would meet and, you know, have a drink and a meal and talk. And one of my most precious memories is I did the videoing for Antonio. So that took 2 days, wherever he is. And we talked a lot, and I asked the questions for you in your absence. And so that's another really, really precious memory. And then Antonio's video, of course, is brilliant. The editing is masterful. I'm bow down, you know, with what he started with. But yeah, so I'm going to just read another short one. To make it discursive, to infect it with speech, a universe that confesses itself, talking animals and fluid expressions, transoceanic currents, sea squeaks, ground swells, whirlpools, voice in the gale, giddy height, florid, blooming, point, counterpoint, the sun in conversation with the umbrella, the breaststroke with the water. A male voice pockmarked with absences, silences, created the dumb universe. It should all be undone, rearticulated lovingly by other lips, the ones kept secret and moist between a woman's legs.
Caroline Di Giovanni.
Very much. Good evening, everyone. What a pleasure to be together with friends and celebrate Luciano. I first met him when John Calabro here brought me down to meet the 4 of Quattro books, and Luciano was very gracious. For my first book, all 4 of them were part of it, and Allan was the editor. The second book, Luciano took on to publish with Lyrical Miracle, but he did it as a book form, not a handmade, and I appreciated that. He found me a fabulous cover designer. He found me an editor who wouldn't let me get away with a single extra comma, and we had a good time. That's one of my favorite books. After that, I just would see Luciano from time to time, always a big smile, always a friendly voice. We read a few times together. What a pleasure, and what a person to miss. So I'm going to read a few little short things from the Angel Notebook. I think of Luciano as one of my angels. I kissed an angel and became the mad gestures of a falling kite. The most powerful angels are made of air. Summer breeze pushed me in that quiet place adjacent to nothing, between word and world. Heaven's favorite angel is not child or garden, is transparency, stepping in and out of lungs, air before a footstep, air on stairs before a climb, air around a body after a fall, air docked in the mouth after death, air lounging outside the womb before a birth, is 0 degree seated and poised on an empty chair. And one more. Point in the night, air, perfectly still, counts my gambling losses. The angel of slow disappearance is in my self-neglect. Thank you.
Steve Venright.
I'm really grateful to be part of this beautiful event tonight, and I'm glad it's being recorded too, so that others who aren't here will be able to experience some of Luci's work this way, and to get a sense of how deeply he was loved and what a great inspirational force he was and remains. I had to skip the line tonight, and I hope that in addition to that crime, I haven't stolen someone's Luch poem, but there's so many wonderful ones to choose from that I'm sure you'll do fine. So I better get things rolling here for my 3 minutes. Luch was a mentor and friend to my sons and to other young folks I know who were students of his, who look upon him with great fondness and admiration. He was a poet, teacher, publisher, artist, bookseller, and just really the essence of the small press scene here. And besides that, a fond and just a delightful part of our lives. My wife Dale and I are miss his presence. This is Nocturne from the Angel Notebook. Drunk beside the dead carnations, I stand at the gate, the back garden at night. is how it was when my parents were alive. Father's self-lit apparition at the kitchen window, nose against the fly screen, waves to me. A cat, a raccoon, a third beast, transfixed on the garage roof, stare down. A small breeze touches my face, circles me once, but having no hands to say goodbye, crosses the fence, flaps the neighbor's hanging linen. I wave back at the windowed figure. The grief gathers again, pours itself into my small white cup, and I swallow it one more time.
Thank you, Steve. Clara Blackwood.
Good evening, everyone. I'll also be reading from the Angel Notebook, and this was the first, this was my introduction to Luciano's work. So it was my introduction to his work, and I got to know him on a personal level when I worked with him and produced a Lyrical Miracle book. So that was such a great experience. I know so many people here published with his press, Lyrical Miracle, and I really cherish those books. There's a big shelf that many Lyrical Miracle at home. The poem I'm going to read is End of the Line. The all-night streetcar is no monster. Its wheels will not slice your toes. The passengers are not drunk or crazy. They're old men who finished their lives. Time has turned their faces, reversible as coats, inside out. They're going home to empty playing fields, lighted all night like souls after prayer. When you're old, you'll drop your eyes in the fare box, ride the vehicle to the last stop, where the houses are made of turtle shells and the street lamps grind light into your skin, where memory, her head covered in a black mantilla, meets you on the streetcar island, feeds you figs sewn to the hem of her skirt, escorts you to a park full of lost loved ones. They'll greet you with flower beds, their nakedness a bare leg of 12 moons, their weather a blue beast gently striped with drizzle, their kindness a breeze opening your chest with a house key. It'll happen by itself when you're old. The late walk down the avenue and the streetcar will intercept you, open its doors to offer your bones a spare window seat. Thanks.
Corrado Paina.
I'm reading a book, Does Spoke the Plant. It is about Monica Gagliano, an outstanding scientific book about the voice of the trees. And I miss Lucio because he wrote this poem that I found a few days ago for an anthology, and it seems really to summarize the book that I'm reading. So it would have been great to ask him, why did you write this poem without having read the book? Tree by Luciano Iacobelli. To me, they were just tall blanks, remote giants, impassive as nature itself. I could never understand the big deal. Why so many fairy tales and art about so much leaf and bark? But it was love that first made me really look at trees. I would come home from school swollen with infatuation. I would stare at the maple on my front lawn, and it was a peg pinning my imagination to both sky and ground. My vision climbed up the giant's limbs and played there like a divine ape swinging between metaphors and symbols. The tree was love posing, a sculpture of the heart, passion made tridimensional, expressive notes, lean of trunk or twist of branch, leaves juggling and fumbling the light, branch pattern, wind's nervous system. My love was a girl who wanted so much to be elsewhere, who had a few times attempted departure from family constraints, from mind and its shrinking circles. It was our last year of high school, and when the summer came, we spent it cocooned in secret places, talking and embracing under bridges, bleachers, in parks and cemeteries. I promised her a separate universe, bounded only by care and kisses. It was a promise I came to renege when I learned that sometimes romance is just hatred of the world, and love is just love of disappearance. I had not enough space in me to be another's burial place. And so by summer's end, I stood in front of the maple and apologized to it for being the screen of my projection. And I saw it for what it really was, a touchable, climbable solitude, indifferent to hurt and mind, self-contained, myth-resistant. I dedicate this poem to Len Gasparini.
Damiano Pietropaolo.
Good evening, everybody. I first met Luciano Iacobelli at Duni's Cafe. I was sitting by myself, and there was a group of people around this guy who seemed to be the focus of the group. And he says to me, "Are you the guy from the CBC?" And I said, "Yes. You want to join us?" So I joined the group. Now, Luciano, you have to know, was a gatekeeper for the group. If you're in his good graces, you got allowed in. If not, you quickly were shown the way out. I was allowed in, and I became a regular, and and the regularity of the meetings was great, but the regularity of bocce playing was also great. And Luciano organized bocce as well as poetry readings and as all sorts of other things. Now, I had the good fortune to actually travel with Luciano to Stratford every year to see a couple of plays. And one of the things that happened to us is that we would engage in real deep conversations about something that was close to my heart as a radio person and close to Luciano as a poet, which is incarnate versus discarnate language. And an example of an incarnate language might be, for instance, the Star notebooks that he produced. But he also had other fish to fry, as it were. And one of the things that he talked about was the fact that he was an anarchist all the time. He was anti-romantic, an anarchist. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to read a poem that shows the other side of Luciano. It's from his Angel Notebook, and it's about the push-pull of the Italian-Canadian community and the push-pull within the domestic sphere as well as the larger universal sphere of being Italian-Canadian. This is from the Angel Notebook, and it's called Mother Elegy. Mother rolled her own dough and made her own pasta. The sauce produced from backyard tomatoes simmered daily on the elements. Little red splotches covered the stovetop. She couldn't understand why I rejected the home cooking. Tired of the food I had known all my life, I ate sandwiches in restaurants. But one Sunday afternoon, I stayed home and stared at her as she shelled peas, stared at the light reflecting off the metal bowl, stared around the kitchen at the arrangement of the utensils, and thought to myself, my God, what a picture this is. When my mother wasn't looking, I dipped my finger in the sauce, and an old appetite returned. That same day, she complained of an ache. A few weeks later, we were told the worst. A few months more, she was an emaciated memory. After the funeral, I sat on the back porch, and my grief was a bright red geranium. The weeds were the garden's condolences. The morning glories clung desperately to the railing, and I was hungry for the meals I had once refused to eat.
Domenico Capilongo.
So I met Luch a long time ago at John's first launch, and he was wearing his old motorcycle jacket and long hair, and I made him laugh, and he laughed so easily, and we really connected. And he was a mentor and a publisher, and we shared the same birthday, and we shared a lot of interesting moments and readings, and one was in Montreal. We drove to Montreal and shared a hotel room together. If you've ever shared a hotel room with Luch, you'll know he doesn't stop talking. And neither do I, so that was good. And I'm so glad. I was waiting, who's going to read this poem? This is my favorite Luciano Iacobelli poem. I always asked him to read it. I hope I can do some justice. Because, you know, a lot of his work also is so experimental. So this is quite experimental at the end. Notebook 2. The Daytime Stutter. If language is the house of being, then what happens when I stutter? Does the front door open? Does the window break, made and unmade by language? What happens to creation when I trip over my words? A tear in the umbrella, a water-damaged imagination, stuttered prayers summon a twisted God, facing no face. There is no irony in being. I'm trembling fluff. There's the window. There's the wind. There's this wind blowing away this tongue, tied me. There's no salvation in images. I was 9 years old, alone, by myself at the cinema. I sat facing the screen, and for no reason at all, I panicked. Something stammered in me. The flow of who I was interrupted, became aware of myself, but my awareness was loss of place, loss of faith in gravity. Felt like I was not being yanked, but yanking myself out of the universe into nowhere. And the movie continued, and the stupid pictures flickered at me without sympathy. Time and I have broken noses, am half thing, half done in the nooks and crannies of haven't been, am just an am not. The window frame is amphibious, outside the window, yet part of it. I am amphibian, a man, amphibian, manphibian. I, a man, amphib, a man, an amphibian, a fibbing amphibian. I am a frame, frame-phibian. I am a man, a frame, a fray, a man fibbing, a fibbing frame. I am a man in a frame, in a fray. I am an amphibian.
Alana Wolf.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So Luciano was a community person, and he touched so many people from so many different communities. I feel very fortunate that our paths crossed so many times over the years. And like many people have said, he was a talker. And we had many conversations, delicate as well as enthusiastic, and he always had books to recommend. I'm glad I was there for the launching of his last book, almost last book. I think he published another one after this, but this was his, I guess, his magnum opus. And he was fading that day. You could see he was fading, but he was as sparkling as ever. So I'd like to read a piece from this that is both biblical in tone and also futuristic. God I call. God I call, teach me to be both the lamb and the knife that slaughters it. I call on the zero cloth to wipe the smudged blade, the dirt under the nail, the body's cube of pain. Lines of a gambler's face cantered into a bowl. A God I call, whose forehead is a system of underground rooms, wherein are stored parts of a wrestled angel. What can't resist coming forward? The call beyond call, the all in all, the thrall, the rhythm of the question pattern, sound waiting in the delivery room, watching the imagination be born. To Luch.
Thank you, Alana, and let's have a round of applause for all of our readers and for the poetry.
So we're going to start with the second. We're going to begin the second part of this program. The readers in this second part are Giovanna Riccio, Julie McNeil, Kate Marshall Flaherty, Kristen Blank, Lara Solnicki, Lida Nosrati, Patrick Connors, Ricardo Sternberg, and Deborah Barnett. Okay? I met Luciano in probably 1984 at Dooney's. It was a wonderful thing to go to Dooney's and see all these really good-looking Italian boys. John Romano, I think, is here. It was an incentive to go to the cafe and break my shyness, you know. Anyway, Luciano was like a star from the beginning, bright, always in impeccable black jeans, black shirt, black everything, super thin, super cute. And so he encouraged me to sort of come out of my shell because I grew up. I was in the house of a pretty brilliant writer, Ludwig Zeller, who was my stepdad. My mother's an artist. I felt pretty small in comparison to these really, really good artists. Anyway, so Luciano is the person who organized the first reading I ever did at the Rivoli. Luciano was a very important publisher, not just because he brought the four of us together, John Calabro, Allan Briesmaster, myself, to form Quattro Books, but as a publisher of Lyrical Miracle or whatever it is that he tried to do to publish other people. And so when we came together as invited by Al Moritz to form this organizing committee of Giovanna Riccio, Al Moritz, Allan Briesmaster, and myself, Al suggested that instead of my reading a poem of Luciano's, I read a poem of Ludwig Zeller, whom Luciano published. It's a poem that Luciano liked very much, and he gave the title to this little collection of poems, the name of this poem. It's called The Snake Eaters, and it's a poem about seeing, while traveling down to Mexico with my mother, which they did for many years. They would go back and forth to Oaxaca. They drove. My mother drove because Ludwig didn't drive. They came to an area of Mexico in the Sonora Desert that was so poor. People were so poor that the only thing they had to sell by the side of the road were the skins of snakes. the snake eaters. From Matehuala south, desert scalding in a bath of brine, and at the roadside swarms of women who beg for alms never received. Among the yuccas, a cane, and hanging its tip, the remains of a snake, an empty skin, and on the ground, poised on one foot, flesh eater, a hawk behind its eye of steel. Alone and wretched, almost mute, they beg for someone to change their lives, carry them past that horizon where day by day the hawk harries the serpent. There is only rancid bread, milk full of salt to drown thirst, murder hunger. You who put them in the desert, why don't you give them water? Why always the spectacle of that steel beak slitting snakes open from end to end? And why those children begging, useless, not able even to dream? It's true, then, that this is where hell mouth opens and burns insects in madness. Against this place I put my happy childhood, but in my depths, in memory, it hurts to repeat those images. There's no way out. All at once, the skies closed. This poem was translated by Moritz. So, the first reader that I'm going to call up is Giovanna Riccio. Where are you, Giovanna? Oh, there you are.
Is this mic working? Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Well, good evening, everybody. It's so great to see such a great crowd come out for this memorial. I don't know what to say about Luciano. I wrote a tribute in that little Acenti tribute. My theme for that was that the thing I admired most about Luch was his great, great commitment to living as free a life as possible. And he was free in so many ways, despite his gambling addiction. He was even free in that because he had no problem sharing it and turning it into art. And coming up to Clinton's today, I was struck by his generosity because the first time I read at Clinton's, I got this email and I thought, how did I get that invitation? And then, of course, I learned it was Luciano. And I was an emerging poet then. So I don't want to say too much else other than the fact that his generosity, his freedom, and his great, great commitment to art and a life of the mind always struck me. So I shared with Luciano a love of philosophy. So tonight I'm going to read from The Examined Life, which is his book on various philosophers. And I've chosen the piece on Descartes because it's so brilliant. It's Descartes' Meditations in 3 pages. And he manages to capture most of it, the fact that Descartes' position was that you should doubt everything until you get down to zero doubt, first principles, that it's the mind that is the substance of truth, and that all empirical experience is to be doubted and tested and doubted because it is not the way to truth. He captures his dualism. He mentions the cogito. I think, therefore I am. It's all here. A state of doubt. I think I look with open eyes, but eyes could be closed. How often have I dreamt myself dressed when I was lying naked, dreamer dreaming himself, or I could be the free-floating sleep, dreaming the dreamer who dreams himself. State of doubt. A prenatal waiting room, amniotic walls, paneled with amnesia. Under my window, people are hidden under hats and coats. They might not be humans, but robots. I, too, might be a mechanical thing without soul. What if a demon is tricking me and everything around me is stagecraft, including my own body, without arms, without legs, without eyes, my presence theatrical, my flesh a prop? I doubt my balcony and look down at my own existence and watch the happenings below. A pristine uncertainty disengages me from myself. I'm happy to accept I don't exist. Unfortunately, I do. I'm the thing that thinks about its own non-being. I've been up here before in this elevating doubt. And every time I've polluted the height by proving my own existence, methodically establishing my point of origin. A divine architect designed the world, measured, angled me in his own likeness, calculated my profile, and sometimes I think God is too full of my own cleverness to be real. Disinfected of knowledge, opinions, compulsive sanity, I want only to stop thinking, stop being, to be a gourd, to have a head of clay, a body of glass, to be a piece of wax over fire, shape melted, a liquid nothing, flexible. Wax is unknowable. The possibility of infinite forms and changes, unimaginable substratum. Tired of the meticulous steps it takes to think forth a world, I want to stay in doubt, to sleep on the surface of uncertainty, covered by a bedsheet, a clean, fresh-smelling zero.
Thank you, Gio. Wonderful. So next up is Julie McNeil, a poet and a designer and an artist. She designed many of the covers of Quattro books. Come on up, Julie.
Hi, and I'm very happy to see the books so nicely displayed and looking so colorful and neat. And I want to read you the last poem out of the Angel Notebook. It's called Night Walk Through the Old Neighborhood, and it appears that Luciano and I grew up in a similar location. I was at Dufferin and Eglinton, and I think he was down at Dufferin and St. Clair. So his neighborhood was almost mine. Night Walk Through the Old Neighborhood. It's a calm night. There's a blue milk on the sidewalks, warm maternal water in the tree trunks. The neighborhood is a young olive woman. She hangs her imported clothes in boutique windows and sleeps naked. No one would guess from her quiet streets she is a jealous mother overfeeding her children, hiding them, stapling them to her bed, guaranteeing the night will never hear their half Italian, half English prayers. Some of my childhood friends still live there. A disbanded tribe, insomniacs, lighting candles in front of the hallway mirror. They have no features. They are like coins flattened by the train wheel. They are currency no one can spend. We pitched dimes behind the funeral home, told dirty jokes on the church steps, carried home high school crushes under piles of homework. Storefronts were huge cameras photographing every angle of the teenage heart. The long-haired girl who lived above the beer store leaned out and autographed each drop of our collective blood. Her father made her cut her hair and nailed the window shut. Stillness tonight, and everything quiet, except the St. Clair streetcar traveling its straight line between the slaughterhouse and the subway. The road, this empty, seems quite harmless, But I can't forget the fatalities. Children who ran away from their mothers, jaywalked halfway across before they were killed, partly by traffic, partly by the voice calling them back home. I passed the schoolyard. Remember games? Think of the hopes. We dunked through the basketball hoops. I look through a fish market window and watch snails that have climbed out of a basket crawl up a wall. Thank you.
Beautiful. So next is Kate Marshall Flaherty. Is she here? Yay, there she is. Come on up.
So I have a couple of my many memories of Luciano. One was with Nick Beat way back when on Howl for Random Acts of Poetry. Where's Dom? Remember that? That was wonderful. He taught me a bit of Italian, gelati per tutti. And he and I also, besides sharing a lot of laughs, we shared traveling a cancer journey together. And we did poetry and healing with Al, which I remember. So I chose a few poems from the Angel Notebook about angels and about stuttering, because something about the limitations of language and also the transcendence of it. So I'm just going to blend a few little sections. A dismantled angel remakes itself from fallen things, leaves, snow, tears, tests its new body by swimming 50 lengths of a human soul. Pond angel spots a fish, plunges its head into numberless fluid, white snake, neck, disappears under reflection. Dainty angel of the landfill, knee deep in garbage, her small bare fingers recovering second-hand silences. Angels of parameter, boundaries in which we discover ourselves, ground and water, night and day, up and down, ebb and flow, life and death. So we can cherish the past, you make us retrieve it archaeologically, artifact by artifact. Angel of sand, angel of stuttering, the tongue's ingrown tulip. The stutter reminds us language is a reversible accomplishment. I remember nothing of it at all except the stuttering refrain. Let me lose. Let me loose.
Thank you, Kate. It's very moving, isn't it, to see all the dimensions of his work, isn't it? Kristen Blank is up now. You ready? Okay. Kristen, come on up.
So I would say that Luciano was somebody who was a mentor to me at a time when I maybe didn't realize how much I needed one. He made me feel respected and like a confidant and like a fly on the wall, experiencing the business behind and the magic of bookmaking. So I'm going to be reading from Dolor Midnight tonight. I think this is a really great collection because I think it's very honest, and I think that Luciano, as others have said, knew how to live well and honestly. So I'll read two poems from here that sort of capture my memories and sort of substance of how I think of him. Saturday night in the kitchen, I stood next to my father as he played cards with my uncles, glasses of wine and old faded Italian cards. My father forgot me, and I forgot myself. watching him play with his brothers in the reconstructed piazza, each man enveloped in rules I didn't understand. Perhaps a child shouldn't have witnessed such thick smoke or shiny coins. They played the following night, and because the game belonged to them, no one won or lost much. They snapped back to themselves and smoothly returned to family and work. A different breed of men they were than the ones I play with now. They go a full day without a washroom break. Some players wear diapers, would rather shit in their pants than miss a hand. I sometimes play in the basement of an East End Chinese restaurant. We knock each other in the ribs at the cramped tables, a multicultural, multiracial, multilingual bunch. Half the time we play poker, the other half we insult each other in the other's tongue. Whether soul exists or not, the universe is dressed in the fashion of its loss. Boundless space, at the center is a widow's son. A funeral procession of blind, dumb spheres. And everywhere there are attempts to end the mourning. On cratered planets and moons. In the game rooms, in the alleyways, in schoolyards. Dice are thrown against the grieving cosmology.
Lara Solnicki is next. You're there, Lara, right? Come on up.
So I've known Luciano. He's been a very generous person in my life, and starting with my lyrical miracle book that I wrote, and that Allan Briesmaster edited. And those were fun times, and then I used to run into him a lot on the street as well, and we reconnected in around 2018. I'd gone off and become a jazz singer and a composer, and had a pretty good run with that. I'm not saying it's over, but obviously COVID has changed things pretty dramatically. So I will say that Luciano, my life has changed a lot since 2011. Since skeletons have started falling out of the closet in my life, where one at a time I've come to realize that I've had not one but 4 character disordered abusers in my life. Going back, this is not really the time to get into it so much, but to say that I would basically learn about one person in my family of origin and abuse. And then I would sort of, being a strong, independent person, I would manage to get over that to the degree that I could. And then something else would come out and I'd have to deal with that. And it's just been, there have been 4 of them. And the last straw was basically in the springtime when I reconnected with my brother, and I first learned that he was thrown out on the street at age 12 by both my parents, and without having any place to go or any money or anything like that. So I would say that Luciano is somebody who was very expressive and someone that I considered had strong values. And I've pretty much been dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder for the better part of my life. I see that now. but especially since the spring. And I was in Berlin on a couple of grants, and I was unable to function. I couldn't even call Ubers. I lost about 12 pounds in about 3 weeks. And just being who he is, he's someone who's always taken such an interest in people. He's so curious about people. He gets lost in conversations about people. And it's not that I would burden him, but just hearing his reactions like, wow, and stuff like that. And you know, the notion like both my parents are in the arts, you know? You know, I would be crying right now, except for I've had a beer. So I feel actually fairly numb. But I would say that it's been both really painful and extremely, in a weird way, centering to see what a proper father, how he, you know, takes so much joy in being a father, and how the depth of emotion between a parent and a child is not some labile thing where the child is utility and then discarded and lied to and stolen from, and where Holocaust survivors are not stolen from, whether they're your mother or your mother-in-law or just all kinds of things like that, which I've had to come to terms with in my family. So there is a depth of emotion between parent and child, and that is there's supposed to be a natural progression through a life where you raise a child and you feel the joy of enjoying their own successes rather than feeling envy and rage around that. And it has been extremely painful, but centering also to know that I have been the normal one. My values are normal. My emotions are normal. And these people will not destroy me. A child staring out in the street, a crumbled nectar in the mouth, the taste of unfinished games or ones that never started. It is this child I want you to remake from the ground of all your impending births, from a water crafting its own clarity. Light and air are metals you can bend. Design a new child from it, because the old child is the universe signaling its pain. Its face an injured sky, and its stars are all the missing falls and scrapes, lost from loss of play.
Thank you very much. That was very moving. Lida Nosrati is next. She's here at the back of the room, and she's making her way over here. I think.
Yeah, I'm in between, so this will work. One of the last times I ran into Luciano was on the college streetcar, and as you may predict, the conversation ran to translation, languages, poetry, and Luciano told me about his trip to Iran, in I think in the 90s or early 2000s. And I asked if he had really fond memories of that trip, and he said he would go there in a heartbeat again. I don't know if he would say the same today, given the situation in Iran. The poems I had picked for tonight were read by friends, so I thought the only fitting way and natural way to pick another poem would be by divination, the way you read Saadi and Hafez from the cities that were much loved by Luciano in his visit. So this poem came up, this page opened. You cause motion by being loved, and I celebrate your stillness by spinning, walking in circles, thinking in circles, echoes and repetitions, zeros, zeros, zeros. Seasons and homecomings and returns, orbits in my turning, spinning, and circling. The mind apprehends the unthinkable as rotations. The senses apprehend the insensible as orbiting body. The circle is your profile. Love moves in circles. I pine for circles, in circles. Let my body be in orbit, and let the orbit be you. Thank you.
Patrick Connors is next. It's the turn of the boys now, I think. A couple of you, anyway.
I'm very honored and grateful to have been invited to be a part of this evening. Luciano is a very important person for me. He published my 2 books with Lyrical Miracle, but he became a very, very important friend as well. We'd go to Blue Jays games and Raptors games and Cafe Diplomatico and Popper's Pub. And just a very special and important person in my life. He gave me this book the last time we had dinner at Diplomatico, so that's why I'm going to read from it this evening. And I'm going to read from page 17 and 18 of Noctograms. Night writing is breakdowns, natural obstacles, interferences, interruptions, drawn out. The nocturnal landscape is built from partial or unresolved concerns. One starts from the salvage heap, recovers the damaged technology, radio with bad reception, static and noise, cry of outer spaces. Night mouths the poem that mouths night, sonnet of sponge soaking up stale fauna, flock of black helixes pecking the old soul, verbal heat unwording in ice age, dead letter office playing dice with lost messages. No pandering to the heart, no soft touch, but a bully verse that punches second sight into the eyes. A passion without context, the operatic scene without the opera. A villanelle that sits on the ocean floor, cutting the stems of waves, then delivering them to a random beloved. A wounded skin, the cuts and bruises arranged into a ballad of empty space, a well-worded illiteracy, a poem tunneling into itself, then dying in the cave-in. Now this excuse... Thank you. This excuse for a caterpillar that's almost a mustache. I am growing for Luciano. I'm going to be donating money to the Cancer Society in memory of Luciano, probably after I shave this monstrosity off. If you want to donate to my campaign, great, but please donate to the Cancer Society in honor of Luciano. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ricardo, you're next. It's your turn. Oh, Ricardo Sternberg. That's his last name.
I think I'll stay with this one here. That seems okay, no? I came to know Luciano through my daughter, Marra, and he was her teacher. And the last few days, I've had several poems circling around and finally landed on this one, which I like in part because of that connection that I first heard about him It was Luch this, Luch that. Okay, enough already about Luch. Invite him. And she never did until she graduated. And then Luch and I became very good friends. He published me in Lyrical Miracle. And then it was me going, Luch this and Luch that. This poem comes from The Examined Life, and I was sitting there hoping nobody would read it, and 2 or 3 of you came up with the book, but not to this poem. And the title does double duty as also the first lines of the poem. The title is Tattoos, Army Jacket, Combat Boots. A hardcover copy of Zarathustra, a mouthful of Hitler and Darwin, he tells us, fuck this puny human race. We're all low-grade beings on the way to extinction. And he dreams of owning weapons that could gun us all down in front of our offices, schools, and shopping malls. He muddles my classes with mispronounced ideas, but I'm convinced that with extra attention and care, this student pockmarked complexion could clear. And so I meet him every day at lunch in my room, offer him great man's ideas, questions and answers, arguments and proofs, debates and resolutions. And I follow his thinking, stammer, web, convolution, twist, and pothole path to the source of his ideas. And what a success the process has been. The boy seems calmer, understands why his thoughts are not thoughts at all, but reflexive gestures, reactions to some far back pain. I send the boy home with journeys, labyrinths, points, counterpoints, constructions and deconstructions, a summer of reading, a lifetime of engagement. But in the fall he returns, covered in a rash, a constellation of open sores on his pin-pricked arms, eyes ringed with hallucinations, no sleep. Sentences he hears in his head slither under tables. They lie on their back, posing as stains, and shadows have informed him that the world is a wheel. He points to me and says, cowards will wait for fire. Points to himself. The brave will light the torch, burn down the wheel, then jump either into God or empty space. He's arrived at his convictions by means of vision and voice. I've arrived at the point where I want only to be safe. Teacher invested in his own skin, my noble vocation, now a career. I meet devil and saint and want them both expelled.
And the last reader for this evening is Deborah Barnett.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I didn't think I was reading tonight, but I am very pleased to participate. Allan selected this poem, and I trust that he knows exactly the poem I should read. Luciano and I met because we're concerned about the book. So Luciano's publishing, I would now call art print publishing. And it's a discipline that he and I had a lot to talk about over quite a long period of time. So I was privileged and really delighted to publish works by Luciano, but it really wasn't like me publishing works by Luciano. It was like Luciano and I figuring out how to present these literary works with the affect of letterpress or paper or the origins of the paper. It was a very deep and interesting, rich environment for literature to live in. So I'm very excited about Luciano. He still lives for me. And because every time I encounter the book, I encounter it with his open and willing exploration of every material, including the text that goes into the making of a book. So I'm going to read this poem that Allan selected and honor Luciano, who lives always for me, and I don't think that's going to change. So anyway, here we go. Music of the clean slate, the final business pouring down the romantic side, clear and liquid. The only requirement is abdomen, compass in the viscera, directions from the night inside. Quiver of a minuscule sorrow, the almost something played sweetly, a near memory abbreviated into song. Goodbye to what never came, to the non-occupied, non-occupying. During the opera, throats measured, time, and the operatic score parked parallel to tragic events could not save the hero. Thanks, Allan. Thanks, Luciano. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Beatriz.
Thank you very much to everybody. I'm going to call Al Moritz to close the this segment of the evening. But before he comes up, I would encourage you to buy books, to buy his art, to look at it, and to continue the sort of celebrating in that way. Okay, Al, it's all yours.
Thanks, Beatriz, and thanks, everyone. That's about all I really have to say. Thanks, Luciano. I don't have too much desire to say anything except Luciano's own words. I'll remember an interview he once gave. He was asked by the interviewer, what are your interweb series of tubes? And he replied, I prefer to communicate by cafes and books. And then the next question was, what tools might we expect to find in your workspace? And he said, a cappuccino. I work in cafes. So I worked with him on the Book of Disorders, which he published in 2011, and that was a great, great experience. And I'll just read a poem from near the end of that book. And yet some of us die perfectly. I was told of a poor monk who lived alone in a cave. A poem provided his food and clothes. When he lived in the world, he was rich. He overlooked the rooftops of Rome. He was a famous musician of exhausted music. Craving another sound, his ears brought him to the desert, and in his dry poverty he heard something new, a calm prenatal hum, a soothing pulse, an ebb and flow. He cured wild animals. His lean and peaceful stature alone healed them. Poisonous snakes joined him in the darkness. Tracks of gazelle, goats, and wild ass were thick about his cell. When he was cold and starving, the grateful desert sent him vultures bearing loaves of bread. A warm lion lay beside him in his final sleep. The animals loved him. Silence made him trustworthy. Nature rested its head upon him. And I pray that I die so gracefully, that the dry desert reveals itself to be the ocean wave it really is, dissolving me in its fluid self. Thank you, Luciano. Thank you, Luciano. Ciao, fratello.